Klingon names, taking their inspiration from the 90s construction toy Connects. Hello, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture that I consume and love, including Doctor Who, films, movies, books, and of course Star Trek. Here again for my weekly reviews of Star Trek Lower Decks. As usual, I will be doing a non-spoiler section up front for all of those people that maybe have clicked on this video and have not seen the episode, and then I'll give you fair warning when I'm going to go into spoilers. Episode 2 was called Envoy, and much like traditional Somebody's using an electric saw in my neighbour's garden. I have no other time to record this video, so I think we're just going to have to put up with it. So that's that noise. Sorry. Episode 2 is called Envoy, and much like traditional Star Trek, we have a plot and a B plot going on. We have an away mission plot, basically. Away mission, a mission plot, and something that's going on the ship, which is quite a standard Star Trek trope now. And so far, in these 2 episodes that I've seen, Lower Decks is using it extremely well. In the first episode, the way that I felt we got a nice balance of the 2 stories, and again in this one we get a nice sort of more, I mean, they're both quite personal stories. They're both give great character development for the characters involved in them out of our main cast. But the plot on the ship is much more just self-contained to the sort of desires of one person, the wishes of one person, and exploring, what they want from their life, their career, and how they're willing to interact with other people as well. And I quite like that. That was nice. I liked it. One thing I would say about this episode is that there was maybe less laugh out loud moments for me personally, and I don't know if that's just because the first episode was so unexpected in terms of, for me, I just wasn't used to it, and a lot of things that make me laugh out loud come from the surprise element, things I'm not expecting. If I'm expecting a joke, even if I find it funny, if I'm expecting it, it makes me laugh less. So maybe after that first episode I've acclimatized a bit more to the humour of the show, and that's why I'm not laughing out loud. There wasn't 0 elements when I had a chuckle, but there was a few, let's say, a few less than when there was, and a bit less hearty laughter than the first episode. But like I say, that might be just because I've gotten used to the humour already. I think we're getting some nice development of the relationships in this show, particularly between Mariner and Boimler. Is that his name? Boimler. They're kind of been paired up in both of the episodes so far. I hope we get to see them sort of split up and paired off with the other main cast at some point as well, because I would hate to see every episode just be one of the plots just being them 2 all the time. But at the moment, we're kind of getting a nice development of their relationship still, which we sort of saw the start of in the first episode. And then we get also a nice bit of development for the relationship between the other 2 characters. I always struggle with names. Rutherford, and it begins with T. Tendi? Is it Tendi? Rutherford and Tendi. There's a little bit of development of their sort of relationship as well, and how they interact with each other, which is quite nice on the ship. The one thing I would say is we didn't get much of Tendi this episode. What we saw of her was really sort of there to provide development for the characters around her at that point. I don't feel we got much of her in this episode. The B plot was very much focused on Rutherford, which worked. So I'm really hoping that either next week or the week after we get a Tendi plot, just to sort of flesh her out a bit more as well. Because I think we were lacking a bit of Rutherford development from last week, even though he was a focus of the B plot. I still didn't feel we got that much from him, but this week we got a lot from him, which was great. And now I think Tendi needs that chance as well. So without going into spoilers, that's kind of really all I can say. I very much am still enjoying it. It's a really enjoyable, entertaining show, and I like the style of it. I did think also, I mentioned last week that I thought in places the pace was a little bit too fast paced, too frenetic, bit like, whippy remark, and it kind of felt like that was a little bit less this time. And I don't know if that's just, again, me getting acclimatized to it and therefore not noticing as much and just getting used to it. Maybe it was just a bit of a whiplash sort of thing last week where I wasn't expecting it to be quite that back and forth. This week it felt a little bit more held back in that regard and not quite as frantic. Again, I don't know if that's the fact that it maybe was less frantic, or maybe it's just me getting used to it very quickly. I don't know, but it kind of felt a little bit better than last week in terms of the pace. For me, personally, I know some people might like that frantic pace, but I was someone who, in the first episode, in parts, it worked in some places, but in parts I just felt it was a little bit too, well, let's let some scenes settle a minute here, because we're not really getting a chance to focus on what's happening. I didn't find that in this episode at all, so that's definitely a plus as well. So, fair warning, there's now going to be spoilers from this point on, so if you don't want to hear any and you haven't seen the episode yet, do go away, but do come back. Please do come back when you've watched the episode, whenever that may be. Let's talk about the opening scene, because this happened last week, not with the opening scene, but there was one moment last week, which I talked about, where I just felt the characters and how they reacted to a particular situation broke the feeling of it being in the Star Trek universe. Most of the time, the humor just comes across really well and is integrated into the world of Star Trek really well. And you don't feel like it breaks the universe and how characters would react. They're just witty characters that maybe say some things, maybe do some stupid things occasionally, but it works for their characters. You know, you would have some people like this. You would have witty people that come back with bantery lines constantly. That's all absolutely fine, and 90% of the time it works. There was one instance last week, which was the moment when the zombie outbreak first started, and I felt like the date carrying on kind of worked in some aspects, but in the one moment where they were behind the table and everyone else was firing at the zombies and they were just like, oh, so where'd you bunk? They weren't doing it. That might have worked if they were doing it while firing or something and just having a conversation, but the fact that they, were ignoring what was going on around them practically and carrying on their date felt off for the world of Star Trek. So that was last week's one. This week, it happened in the opening scene. And the electric energy creature that came onto the ship in the opening scene and Mariner captured and tried to stuff in a bottle and then got allowed to it offered to create something for her, and she asked for a fancy tricorder with a purple stripe. All of that, fine. The moment when it stepped over the line again to something that I felt broke away from what would happen in the Star Trek universe, however the character may be normally, is the fact that after she got what she wanted from the creature, she just let it go. It was a tiny dot by that point, probably harmless, but at that point, she, or at least Tandy, would have contacted somebody, wouldn't have just left it on the ship. I can kind of imagine them, getting it off themselves. Fine. They could have done that without notifying anybody, maybe not reported on it. But the fact that they just left it there felt really weird. But I did love the humour in it, and the scene was very funny up and as a whole. It just kind of felt a bit like it broke the fact that this was meant to take place in the universe we know. And I don't know if that's going to be a recurring thing throughout these episodes. It doesn't happen often. It happened once in each episode so far. So maybe it'll only happen once. Maybe it will happen once an episode. And they do it for the gag and the laugh. But actually, I don't think they needed to do it here. Because most of that scene was absolutely fine. I can buy Mariner capturing it. I can buy Mariner trying to get something from it. Although, she does seem a little bit excited about the fact that it can create her a tricorder with a fancy purple stripe, and that's what she's going to get from it. But, out of the molecules of the air. But isn't that what replicators do? Don't they already have that ability to do that just in their quarters, if they really wanted to? But hey, I could let that go. It was for the humour. That's fine. But that last bit at the end, it's such a silly nitpick, as was last week's. and it is one of the only negatives I have about this episode. So I kind of like, just for the fact that I haven't got any other negatives, kind of felt I had to mention it because, you know, it was something that stood out to me as I was watching it, and it's not going to ruin the episode for me. I'm not going to go, oh, I hate this show because it does this. It's just something that I've noticed. We continue to get a lot of the funny lines, meta lines, referencing things that we as Star Trek fans have noticed for years and, you know, joke about to ourselves. They keep on coming up in this, like all Klingon names have, you know, having an apostrophe and starting with K. That kind of thing is in there, and that's always nice to have that meta humour. There's the stuff with the Ferengi, which I'll get onto in a bit more detail in a minute, but that again is very referencing past Star Trek to us as fans, so that's good. I enjoyed that. So let's talk about the two different plots. The A plot is really Mariner and Boimler going down to the planet to escort. They are escorting a Klingon general or something, or Klingon diplomat to this peace conference, and I thought this was really fun. They played the introduction of the Klingon very well. Because I liked the fact that he ended up already knowing Mariner, and they had this really buddy relationship, and were getting drunk together on the ship and the shuttle as they went down, that kind of thing. That was quite funny. And then they lost the ship because he stole it and went off on a drunken foray somewhere. And then the A plot is them tracking him down. And it was, you know, coming across lots of obstacles. I liked this plot because it was, they both mess up in this, and it showed the different ways they can mess up. Mariner by letting the situation get to that in the first place, by letting him get drunk, by getting drunk with him. She knows what he's like. She knows he could have done this because he knows him. So, you know, she messes up, and then Boimler also, throughout various encounters that they come across while tracking him down, messes up because he's not using his, you know, he doesn't have street smarts like she does. He has the book knowledge, she has the street smarts, and therefore they're quite a nice pairing in that regard because they complement each other very well. And they both kind of get a chance to use their knowledge to save the day. A lot of the time early on it's Mariner using her street smarts and it kind of showing up at Boimler. And then we get to the Ferengi. And the Ferengi, I have mixed feelings on how this went. Because right from the word go on that scene, I kind of knew where it was heading. We get, and the fact, we're in the spoiler section now, so we get the reveal that at the end of the episode that it was all a setup by Mariner to make Boimler feel good, which is, I think, a very heartwarming story, but also a very obvious one. So I am in two minds about it, because on the one hand, I called it straight away. It kind of felt like the obvious way to go with it. But on the other hand, as the scene was playing out, it was using a very stereotypical caricature of the Ferengi, which felt a bit odd at the time. I was watching it thinking, well, this is kind of TNG sees how they were portrayed in TNG early season 1 and 2 and that sort of era. And they've been, as a race, been developed a lot more since then, with obviously on Deep Space Nine particularly. And yeah, they do are after profit a lot of the time, but there is more to them than that. And this was a very stereotypical portrayal of them. So I was a little uneasy about that. However, then we get the bit at the reveal at the end where Mariner contacts the guy and it turns out he was just a friend that was owed her a favour and was helping her out by pretending to try and rob them. And, you know, she's like, oh, how's your family? And then we get the sort of more nuanced Ferengi, or at least a hint at the nuanced Ferengi that we know. So it rescued that for me, but again, it was a little bit obvious. So I honestly still don't know how I feel about that ending and whether or not I like it, because it also, it kind of slightly takes away of the fact that Boimler did save the day at one point. Whereas, because we had this nice thing where they both messed up in different ways, and then we had this nice ending where they both saved the day in different ways in various different situations. And did the setup her setting that up take away from the fact that he had saved the day? Because in the end, he didn't save the day. They weren't actually in any danger. I don't know. I'm unsure how I feel about that. But then we've also got the nice sort of heartwarming aspect of their growing relationship, and it's a nice development moment. Mariner was willing to, take that hit and effectively humiliate herself in order to make him feel better, because he was at a real low after having messed up on each of the other occasions where she'd had to save the day. So I really don't know how I feel about it. I'm not going to put it in the sort of it's a negative column, but it's not really a plus either. I'm very undecided on that last scene. I'd love to know what your thoughts on it are. Where does it fall for you? Do you like that twist at the end? Or would you prefer it to be that he had saved the day and Mariner generally was about to get mugged? I suppose it wouldn't have fitted with her character. Being very street smart, she would have known who the Ferengi are and wouldn't have just walked into a situation like that. So it would have felt slightly odd. But, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm really intrigued to see where everybody else falls on this, because I'm just so undecided about it at the moment. Then we have the B plot with Ensign Rutherford, who, because we got a hint at last week that him and Tendi were kind of... Is it Tendi? I think it's Tendi. There might be a little bit of a blossoming relationship there. They certainly have a connection. And it turns out that he has agreed to watch a star nebula thing. I can't remember what it was with her, but he's got duties he needs to do. So being the nice guy that Rutherford is, and maybe because he has a little crush on her, I don't know, he decides that he's going to ask for a reassignment to a different department so that he is more free to spend that time with her that he promised. And we get from this a whole host of lovely scenes of him trying out the other departments, namely command, medical, and security. And each of those scenes I thought was absolutely brilliant. In fact, I probably enjoyed this part of the episode more than I did the A-plot. And the one thing one aspect of it I really liked is that when he goes to his commanding officer in engineering, and he's like, and he's really nervous about moving departments, and he asks, can he move departments? We get led down the track of thinking that his commander is going to be really annoyed and insulted that he is asking to move out of his department, because he's just been going on about how he's his best man and stuff like that, best worker on the team. And it goes dark. It's very stereotypical, looks like he's got an angry face. And then he just switches and goes, that's brilliant. Good. Go and explore and find out what is your true path in life. And I just think that so epitomizes the supportive nature that you imagine Starfleet having. And the fact that, and it was a nice, flip and a nice joke, because they led into it in the way that made you think, with all the framing and then the way they drew the faces and everything, that he was going to be angry about it. And they pulled this joke again later when he leaves security. And I think why it works a second time is because you kind of think that the security are portrayed in this as this kind of tough. I think they call them, I can't remember if they call them as a pack or something like that. They're like this kind of security bros type attitude, it feels like. And therefore you think, okay, maybe they are getting angry this time. And then it pulls the rug from you again and shows exactly the same thing. And I really like the fact that it does show that Starfleet is so supportive of its staff, and that, if they want to try something else, they're very keen for encouraging that. It's just a very sweet moment. And the humour in it worked really well, even though they did it twice. And of course, we get some funny scenes in the other areas as well. So we've Command. He basically kills everybody in the simulations because he just doesn't know how to make a decision. So Command is not for him. In medical, he has no bedside manner whatsoever. We get a very nice scene there. And then with security, we had a scene in the trailer which we didn't know what that meant, where he's fighting the Borg. And that turns out just to be a simulation in this episode. But so that answers that question. We're probably not going to get a Borg-centric episode in this series, at least. because the clip that we thought might be from a Borg-centric episode was actually just a simulation. But that was nice. He's clearly got some fighting skills that maybe we'll see come up again when he uses his implant to sort of predict tactics and things like that. So that's something that maybe we'll see going on. And of course he works out that engineering was the place for him all along, and it's his true destiny, and how he loves being in those Jeffrey tubes. And so he goes back to engineering, and him and Tendi end up watching the star burst thing, but from, you know, the tablets, the pads within the Jeffries tube. So I think we're going to get some more, hopefully we'll get some more development of their relationship, and they're certainly growing closer, I think, and whether or not we'll see it develop into a romantic relationship, I don't know, but I think it's certainly one way they could go throughout the series. They have a lot in common. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, I've just seen in my notes, that the supportiveness that his commanding officers in various different areas as he's going through, maybe apart from the cat doctor creature, everyone else of the commanding team is very, very supportive of him moving departments, and while he's, you know, getting things wrong in the job. The cat lady's a little bit more angry about it, but everyone else is very supportive. The second in command is, everyone, you know, even when he's killing people in simulations, the second in command is just like, oh, well, that's never happened before. Oh, well, let's try again. and on we go. And I think it's a nice contrast to how they might have been viewed, the commanding officer staff last episode, where we got, you know, when Tendi arrived on the ship, we had the guy that was checking her in and was, although he's not one of the commanding officers, he was a bit condescending. And then on the bridge, the second in command was a little bit abrupt with Boimer when he got to the bridge. So I think last episode didn't give a very good impression of the commanding staff, but this episode we got a bit more of a view that, you know, they are the kind, supportive people that we might hope they would be. So yeah, I think going strong this series. I'm still very much enjoying it. It may not have made me laugh out loud quite as much as the first episode, but I still very much enjoyed it, and I still found it funny. So I'm still looking forward to seeing episode 2, seeing where these character developments and relationships are going. Like I said, I hope we get something maybe Tendi focused next week, and maybe pair her up with one of the other members of the team instead of Rutherford all the time. I do want to see her and Rutherford's relationship continue to develop, but I just think maybe let's mix it up a little bit. Let's have her, you know, have a plot where she's with Mariner for most of the episode, or Boimer, but I, you know, let's just see more of her and see more different interactions with different pairings of people. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and I will see you next week for episode 3. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. It really helps out the channel, and I will see you then. Goodbye.